We are on my road trip, which I've been planning for a few months now. In fact, it's the culmination of 40 years of being in NatWest, in the sense that it was 40 years ago to this day that this young Simon Teague, aged 16, knocked on the door of NatWest Warmer branch, and the first day of my career, which was to last for 26 years. And in 2008, the banking crisis came. No one saw it coming, and I was offered redundancy, and so decided then to leave. And because I was going through a really tough time. In fact, I would describe my career as 25 years of joy and 1 year of hell, really. So that's why I left in that final year. It wasn't a year that I could sustain anymore. But overall, when I look back on my banking career, I look on it with real fondness, which is why I wanted to do this road trip, which is to travel around all the NatWest branches that I have very fond memories of working in. I came across some wonderful people during that time. I will save a lot of it, I think, for the times that we arrive at the different branches and branch locations, and I'll be able to tell you lots of different stories of some of the shenanigans, some of the really good things that were going on in NatWest at the time, and yeah, the good, the bad and the ugly. This is where it all began 40 years ago to the day. On the 1st of February 1982, a very young 16-year-old called Simon Teague came and knocked on the doors of this used to be NatWest Bank, and has since, as you can see, it's now Strand Pharmacy. But it was a cold day like this, and I remember feeling really nervous, even though I knew the bank manager, Jeff Hall, because he used to live up my road, and my dad had had a word with him and put a good word in for me. And when I came for the interview, I think it was pretty much on the cards that I was going to get the job, despite stiff competition, according to the admin manager, Eric Bowles. Now, I want to remember Eric especially because he was a gracious man. He used to sit in a little box just by this window here and puff away on his pipe all day long, and he would be shrouded in smoke. Sometimes you only knew he was there because there was smoke filled in the booth. And he would come into my little back room where I was printing checkbooks or typing things onto the computer, which was my very first job. And he gave me this piece of paper one day, and he said, "Teague," because in those days I was Teague and he was Sir, "sign this piece of paper." And I signed it, and after I'd signed it, I asked him, "What have I just signed?" And he said, "It's your pension, lad. You'll thank me for this in 40 years' time." So I thank him because he did me right by signing that piece of paper. And here we are. Can you believe it? 40 years later, and my pension kicking in, and I'm reflecting on a wonderful career. This was a great branch. It was a family branch. I can name every person that worked in this branch, from Bob Reynolds, Matthew Kelly, Alison Minot, Alison Green. Oh, they were just such a wonderful team. And we had wonderful Christmases together, but only a couple, because sadly I was only here for 15 months before the bank moved me on to Buckland, Dover branch. I always have fond memories of everybody that I worked with in this branch. It will stay with me forever. And I really believe that the Lord's hand was upon my life even at that point as a young 16-year-old tearaway. My first investment, actually let me tell you, my first salary. I remember opening my salary cheque, and my first payment was £176.29 for a month's work. That was my first salary, and I invested that money towards my first car, which was a little green Mini. Prior to getting my Mini, I used to cycle to work down this street here from mum and dad's house, park my bike around the back, and it meant that in those days you were allowed a full hour for lunch. I could cycle back home, have my sandwiches at home, cycle back again. I was probably quite fit at that stage. But then when I was able to get my car, I was ready for my next move, which came quicker than I wanted, quicker than I expected. I got called into Mr. Bowles's little booth one day, I think it was a Thursday, and he said, Teague, on Monday, report to NatWest Buckland Dover branch. I had no idea where that was, but that was where I moved next, and that's where we're going to next. So come with me and we'll head off in that direction. I also want to share with you that the purpose of this road trip that I'm doing, because it's for me an opportunity to show my gratitude and thankfulness to God who kept me through that whole period. You know, I look back on my life, and every step, every moment in my life, the Lord was with me. Even though I didn't necessarily accept that, or I wasn't a Christian, there were times when I was almost a Christian. You know, I just didn't have the Holy Spirit in my life. I hadn't invited the Holy Spirit in, but I did believe in God. And I know that every move that took place in the bank was God moving me to somewhere where I was going to encounter him again. And I have so many encounters with God in my life, but I rejected him at every stage, and yet he still kept me in a really good place, and my career thrived, I progressed, and I moved from place to place. So I wanted just to spend some time honouring God in these next couple of days. I'm on this road trip, and also giving you an insight into a little bit of history of my career, and you know, who is Simon Teague, what did he go through, and what has he come through to, you know. So I hope you enjoy the rest of this video as we dot around in the early part, half of Kent, and then later on you'll see where we go. We're driving along now through a warmer. This is called the Strand, and over here is the Royal Marine Bandstand. And I remember in 1989 I got up to go to work. At that point I was working in Folkestone, and I heard this huge bang, and I thought, what was that? By the time I got to work, I was told the news that the Royal Marines the Royal Marines band had been attacked and blown up by the IRA, and they were young lads. One of them was in my class at school, and this building here, this is new, but behind it this is the Royal Marines barracks, and this is where it all took place. And the next weekend, the following weekend, the Royal Marine Band defiantly marched through Deal, and the whole population of Deal, about 30,000 people, came out, and where those 13 band members had been killed instantly, because the bomb was left in the breakfast hall, so they were having breakfast when it went off. They left their spaces in between, so they marched in the order they would have marched, and there was a blank space where that band player would have played. So it's very sad, but it was every year now that is remembered. The Royal Marines are remembered every year here in Deal, and they come back every other year to play at the bandstand, which is incredible. We're just going now to this church here, this Baptist church. There's a little village hall here. I'm going to show you this little village hall coming up before the garage, and this is where I studied my communion. I did communion as a 10-year-old boy, and did a course that meant that I could go for confirmation at the Church of England and with the Bishop of Dover. And I'm turning in now to where I used to live, which is very emotional to come to this place, but this is Knoll Place. This is where, as a 6-year-old, Mum and Dad moved down from Birmingham when I was 6 years old. Knoll Place. And this is our family home that we used to live in for all those years, 43 years. Mum and Dad used to live here, and all these people in these houses, they all knew each other. They had parties every year. This is the Rembridges lived here, the Hartwells lived over there, the Cannings lived here, and this area here I'm turning around we had my fondest memory of this area is in 1977 we had the Queen's Silver Jubilee, and we blocked off the whole road and had this huge party in 1977. So I was 12 years old then, and it was really great. And then because the road slopes down, as kids we used to have skateboards and do skateboard runs down the road here, which was great fun, as you can imagine. But yeah, that's the family home of the Teagues, which of course with Mum and Dad's passing is now owned by a lady called Vicky, who's really nice and is keeping in touch with me. So yes, happy days, happy memories. We're off to Buckland Dover now. And here we are at Buckland Dover branch. I used to come here on a motorbike. My mum had forbid me from having a motorbike because her brother had a serious motorbike accident. And so I had to do this behind her back, bless her. I bought this Honda 250, which I used to hide down the road and put all my gear in and then arrive home looking like I'd just got off the train in my suit. But I used to come here and park in this little road here. And in the winter, it was in the middle of the winter, so I used to be so frozen to the bike, I'd have to prise my fingers off the handlebars and walk into work like this. It was so cold. I have two memories of this place, so let's have a little wander across there now. It was actually a very big building, but not so many staff, so you felt a little bit lost in this place. And the two memories I have is that this was one of the first banks in Kent to have an ATM service till installed. And it was in the wall here. It's just along here somewhere. You'll probably be able to see it. Well, actually you can't really see it now. It was somewhere here, and this was installed, and we invited June Whitfield, who was an actress, to come and open it with cutting a ribbon and everything. And I remember the television cameras being here, and again I was quite taken over really by the amount of attention that it got. But we would come into this building here. I mean, look at this typical old NatWest door look. In fact, it's open, but I don't know what goes on in this building anymore. It's no longer NatWest, but it's been empty for many, many years. And one other memory I had, although I was engaged at the time to a young lady called Louise, there was a young girl that used to come in and do the banking for Fair Ross Insurance. And she was very attractive, but I was so shy in those days. I used to get really embarrassed, and she would walk into the building and everybody would go, "Here's Simon, here she comes," and I would go bright red. And this used to really bother me to the point that every time she came in, I go just bright red for no reason. I used to dread her coming to my counter because I forgot how to count when she was there. I was a complete useless blob of jelly. And I never found out her name, and nothing ever came of it. So there we go, maybe a lost opportunity. But I was here for 6 months, no longer. I didn't particularly enjoy coming here, to be honest, but I then got a call to say on Monday, report to Canterbury head office, where you're going to join the lending team as a runner. And we'll go on to there shortly, and we'll show you what that looked like. They were 3 years I spent in Canterbury, 3 great years. So I'm looking forward to seeing what's happened to that building since. Okay, so we are here in Canterbury at the old NatWest Canterbury head office branch, where I was transferred in 1985. And this is a place that I stayed for 3 years. This is a little temporary letterbox they've put here because this building is now completely empty and no longer used by NatWest. I used to come in this entrance here and up through the main double doors there. There was a set of stairways, and the building here was the lending head office. So we were responsible for all the decisions that were made regarding lending companies money here in Kent. And my job as a very low clerk was simply to do the filing. And I was called the runner. I was also given lots of other nicknames in this place. And there was like a butler that worked here, and the area director worked here. So they used to have parties up there on the top floor and invite guests. But one year we had this Christmas party where we were all invited to come in fancy dress. And the theme was when the ship went down. And the area director came as Neptune. He was a huge guy anyway, but he was wearing this massive Neptune costume. And one of the young girls from the office just down there, because there were two offices and I used to run between the two, one of the young girls came wearing just a pair of shells with a small string in between, which someone cut during the Christmas party. I won't say any more about that, but they were some of the antics that used to go on in this building. I used to spend every lunchtime down in Canterbury Cathedral. I used to walk down this road into Canterbury, and if it was a sunny day, I would go down there and spend my lunch in the cathedral gardens. And it gave me this kind of peace. And even though I wasn't a Christian then, I used to really enjoy walking around the gardens, or sometimes even going into the cathedral. It was free in those days. And I had this peace that I believe now, when I look back, the Lord was giving me an insight into what it would be like if I was living the way He wanted me to live at that time. But I spent 3 years here. I enjoyed my time for the most part, but I was ready to leave. So I was starting to get frustrated at just doing the filing. And then one happy day, someone from the HR department just down the road called me in and said, "Simon, you're off to NatWest Folkestone branch." And that was the next step in my career. It's interesting actually that whilst we're driving on this little bit of road here, there's a story on this small stretch of road. One morning I was driving to Canterbury, and I used to live in Warmer in Deal with Mum and Dad. But I was driving to Canterbury and there was thick fog and you couldn't see anything, and all of a sudden there's people in the road waving, there's cars on the side of the bank, there's cars upside down, and I've literally driven into what looked like a war zone, with all these cars that had this huge accident because they'd all piled into the back of each other along this stretch of road here. And I was able, in my little Mini that I had at the time, to drive up the bank. It's a little bit further back there now, but drive along the bank because this is the only way I could get round all these cars. There were probably about a dozen cars involved in this accident. And I drove all the way to Canterbury. I drove not all the way into Canterbury, but just on the outskirts of Canterbury was a truck stop. And I drove into there, I ran into there and I said, "There's been a big accident." And the chap in the guardhouse was able to call the ambulance, police, fire brigade, etc., etc. And he said, "You've done your bit. You know, you can't go back." I couldn't go back because it's a dual carriageway. So I carried on to work. And I was working at NatWest Canterbury branch, doing Saturday mornings only, because I wanted to understand what it was like to work in the branch whilst I was working at the head office. And I got there, I sat down and I sat at my till, and then I fainted. I think the shock suddenly took over me and I was in shock for the rest of that morning. It just kicked in that way. Here we are at NatWest Folkestone. I have such fond memories of this place. I ended up living back in Folkestone. And there's two parts of my career in this building. The first part is when I was a young man from 1988 through to about 1991. And then towards the end of my career, I set up a miniature head office in the very top floor of this building. It's 9 stories in total. There's a lift, and you'll find out why that's relevant as we go in. But let's go in because it's a really chilly day here. And nothing has changed about the front of this building. It's always had these brilliant sliding doors and escalators up to the first floor. So let's travel up these escalators. And I used to have the keys to this building. So I would come in, turn the escalators on, open up the doors, open up the bank, and be responsible for that part most days, in fact. And we were open Saturdays as well, so I would always be opening on a Saturday. So here we are. Not a lot has actually changed in here other than the technology. There used to be 50 staff, there's now 6, as I said earlier, and it's full of this technology. We just wander around this way a little bit. We'll just get to see the banking hall. And this is all very different now to what it used to be when I was younger. We're going to walk through now to the senior bank manager's office. This is one of the few remaining branches that are still in operation that I used to work in. And there's a banking hall full of people here, but there used to be 50 staff in this branch. Now there's only 6. And I've stepped into the senior bank manager's room. This would be like the headmaster's office at school. If you get called in here, it's usually because you've done something wrong, or on a Friday, you'd get called in here around about 11 o'clock. And if you've had a good week, he would sit you down. He'd have a big oak desk in this area here. He'd sit you down in this chair, these chairs, and he would say, "Teague, time for a tipple." And in this very cupboard here was a drinks cabinet full of vodka, whiskey, brandy, the whole works. And this is still the original cupboard with these books. Look at some of these books. This is incredible here. Here we go. What do we have here? Thompson's Dictionary of Banking. Wow, that's got about 100 years old, this book. I mean, it's a relic. So incredible that it's all still here untouched. And yes, so you'd come in here on a Friday, you'd have a few drinks, and you'd end up down at the Pullman pub. That was a good week. But I have some very, very fond memories of this branch. And the main reason for that is because this is where I met my first wife, Kath. I was a young man, it was 1988, we got transferred, and it was full of young people in this branch. Come Easter, Christmas, summertime, we used to have huge staff parties. And that was really where I met Kath. I was engaged at the time, called that engagement off, and then we started a relationship together, which was 20 years, and we had 2 wonderful daughters from that relationship. So it all started here at NatWest Folkestone. And one of the stories about Jim, bless him, and the second manager that's in the room along, a lady called Nadine Brown, is that they were both alcoholics. They would turn up to work about 10 o'clock in the morning, still hungover from the night before. And Nadine, I used to work for Nadine directly, and to help her remember what she'd asked me to do, she would write all these instructions down on post-its and stick them on her desk. And at 9 o'clock in the morning, I would come into her room, I would look at all the post-its, and I would think, nah, don't want to do that one. I'd whip the post-it off, screw it up and throw it away. And later in the week, she would say to me, "Simon, didn't I ask you to produce a report on XYZ?" I go, no, I don't remember that, Nadine. Is there a post-it for it? No, I'm sure I wrote a post-it for that. She would go, trying to seek the easy life. But Nadine gave me a report one year and she used one word to describe me, which was undemonstrative. I had to go and look that word up, but undemonstrative meant shy. So I was still quite a shy young man in those days, even though I was a bit of a rebel as well at heart. And one of the stories of a staff Christmas party I will reveal to you now. It's the famous Linda Butcher story. And Linda took a traction to another chap in the bank, and suffice to say they got very friendly in the lift, because this building is about 9 stories high and the bank is on the first 3 floors. And the next 6 floors are various other organisations. So she got very friendly with him in the lift for such a long time that the staff Christmas party ended and Jim Newms was locking up the bank and setting off the alarm, and off he went home, drove home, blind drunk. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, he got a phone call from the police saying there's 2 members of your staff that have just phoned out to say they're still trapped inside the building. And that story, of course, went round the whole bank, the famous Linda Butcher story. So I have some very, very fond memories of this place. I worked hard here, but I really enjoyed it. And I had 3 really wonderful years with some great people in this branch. And then the call came, Simon, Monday morning, please report to the new head office, which is in East Grinstead. And the story here is that they didn't know that at the time I'd saved up enough money to buy my first house. So I had a little house in Deal that I'd not long purchased, about within 6 months, and they were looking to move me to East Grinstead. And of course, if you own a house, then they have to arrange a full house move package, which meant staying in a hotel. I ended up staying in this hotel that we're about to go to now for 6 months. It was fantastic. I put on 2 stone in weight, but it was fantastic. So we're going to head off there now, and I'll see you there. Over 30 years since I was last in this hotel. Can you believe it? That was when the bank moved me up from Folkestone to East Grinstead to the head office here, and initially I was on my own whilst I was looking for a house to buy, but I was joined by 4 or 5 other people, which was fantastic. I was gazumped on 3 properties before I was able to buy my little house at number 11 in Graves, and in that time that 4 or 5 of us went horse riding, taken bowling, we went to virtually every restaurant in East Grinstead, and I had the best time ever for the first 6 months of staying here in this luxurious hotel. And you understand why. God is so good. This is Cantaloupe Road, East Grinstead, and it's currently now what looks like social housing, but prior to that NatWest owned the whole of this building and all 3 floors. The bottom floor was HR, the middle floor was lending, and in fact the top floor also became lending. And I was moved to East Grinstead in around 1991-92, and I was moved here as a lending officer. So my job was to assess lending applications from business managers from all over the southeast, and it all came into this building. And one of the things that I remember was being very shy. This theme of being shy meant that I was quite nervous sometimes when I was working here, because there was a lot of high-powered people, big decision makers here. And actually I started to experience a period of anxiety and stress and worry and all those things. And there was a time when I actually felt almost out of control of my stress and anxiety. So it was a period of, I suppose, not sure about who I was and where I was going. And I ended up working here for nearly 5 years, which was too long. By the time we got to the end, I was desperate to get out of this building. In fact, I contemplated leaving NatWest a number of times because there was no future opportunities for me that I wanted to take. But then I felt that going back to a branch might help me, and that's what I started to seek. What opportunities might there be working back in the branch network? And that led me to my next promotion, which took me from what was a job that I really didn't like or enjoy into a place in NatWest that I really thoroughly loved. So I went from my worst job in the bank here to my best job in the bank, which we're about to go to shortly. And one of the things that I did here that I remember to help my shyness was I signed up to be on the Sports and Social Committee. And we ran a number of really great sports and social events. One of them was a day around this building. We would have an assault course. This was all grass at the time, and it goes all the way around this building. And then there's a car park here, and we built this assault course that you could run all the way around the building, leap over this wall, and do all sorts of things that we'd put into play, a bit like an army assault course. And it was really great fun, and it helped to start build my confidence, which was what I really needed in preparation for the jobs that lay ahead of me, though at the time I was not in a good place when it came to my own self-confidence and self-esteem. I started going to a church again, but this time I went to Tunbridge Wells, a beautiful little church called St Luke's in Tunbridge Wells. We're off to Tunbridge Wells, St Mark's Church in Broadwater Down, and the sat-nav is going to take us there, as you can hear. But you know, the reason for going there, and there's a very particular reason, is that for many of us during our life, we will experience times of anxiety, worry, concern, and I started to experience anxiety whilst I was here in East Grinstead. I'd been here for about 2 years, and I can't explain what it was, but it was just this feeling of panic and a feeling that I was in the wrong place and I didn't want to be here anymore. And I felt that there was something missing in my life. So I'd been around one or two of the churches here in East Grinstead, but it's like the Mormon capital of the UK here. So there are many, many Mormon churches. There's a Mormon temple down the road. So I found myself driving one Sunday morning over to Tunbridge Wells, and I discovered this wonderful, wonderful church called St Mark's Church, with guitars and drums, a wonderful vicar called Francis, supported by a very able deacon called Linda. And I just felt so at home in this church. I'd found, and I started to find myself again and overcome these feelings of anxiety and panic. And eventually I loved this church so much, I was going on a Sunday morning and a Sunday evening, and Kath then started to join me because she'd moved up here with me, and this was the church that we then got married in, and we did the marriage course and we got married here in the church. So it was a good time, and I felt I was getting closer and closer to the Lord. And then I got told one day, Teague, you're off. We want you to become the area manager, or like a miniature area assistant manager for a group of branches in the Maidstone area. And it was all the what they called the sub branches, which were all the little branches in all the villages. And it was a pilot. It had been tried before, but it had failed, and they decided to give it one more go by appointing a manager to look after these particular sub-branches, these village branches. And we are going to go to those branches after we've visited the church. So once we get through these traffic lights, we'll be on our way. It was only a year later that they closed this head office after I left. And they moved everybody up to Manchester. So I'd have either lost my job at that point, or I would have had to have moved up to Manchester. Oh, gosh. It's incredible. When I reflect on the way the Lord has stepped in, sometimes allowing you to experience like the worst things that you can't fathom, and then he pulls you out. It's almost like they happen as part of that journey of needing to be somewhere else, and he pulls you out of that place to that somewhere else, because without that I would have ended up in Manchester probably, or jobless, and which would have not, I wouldn't be here right now, wouldn't be part of Favour House Church, I wouldn't have met Yitka, I wouldn't have, you know, all these things that you think, wow, everything's as part of his design, isn't it? It's amazing. Whilst we're on our way to Tunbridge Wells, I would like to just share with you my experience that I had staying back there in the Felbridge Hotel in East Grinstead. Last night I was praying, and you know, my mind was reflecting on this wonderful trip and how blessed we've been. Everything's fitted into place. All day yesterday we had found parking spaces just at the right time in the right place, and we were really blessed to be able to go into one or two of the branches, and I really felt like this is a celebration of everything the Lord has done for me over the past 40 years, my career. And as I was reflecting, I was thinking, you know, this really, if I was in the bank, this would be my last day at work. This would be my retirement. And I was thinking about retirement, and I felt the Lord say to me, the last 40 years have been your preparation. Now the work begins. And it's really so true, and it really touched my heart, and I know that in my heart. Now the work begins. The Lord has spent 40 years preparing me, and I got this sudden memory pop back into my head of a time after we moved from East Grinstead to Maidstone to Pennenden Heath, and we found a church there very quickly called St Luke's Church with Pastor Eric Delve. And we were going there for about 6 months or so when this chap came up to me, and he was a policeman, but he was very active in the church. And he came up to Kath and I, and he said to me, Simon, I really feel the Lord has spoken to me. You're going to be a pastor one day. I've completely forgotten this memory. And I looked at Kath and I said, did you hear that? What he just said to me? That's ridiculous. He thinks I'm going to be a pastor. And I completely discounted what he said. But that was a prophecy. It was a prophecy over my life. It was a prophecy leading right to this moment now. I get emotional. But it's a moment when the Lord has prepared me and is telling me, no, you are a pastor. This is your calling. And now you've been prepared, the work begins. From this day, this period of reflection and taking time out to allow the Lord in, and to allow the Lord to celebrate what he's done for me, but to allow him to speak to me in a still small voice. That was the preparation. Now the work begins. And that prophecy is confirmation of where I believe he's been leading me right to this point right now. So thank you, Lord, that you never give up on me. I discounted that completely. I'd even forgotten it completely, but he reminded me this morning, and he reminded me that even from the moment I was born, he had a plan in my life, a plan for my life. And that's true of every one of us. He has a plan for each and every one of us, and I pray this so much for my daughters, that they will hear his voice and understand what his plan is for them. We pray for all our children, don't we, that they are led by the Lord, and that good things come to those who, come close to him and understand and know what their calling is. Thank you, Jesus. So I was driving around Tunbridge Wells, not finding anything suitable, and driving down this road here, which is called Broadwater Down, thinking, well, I'm in the middle of nowhere. I may as well turn back and go home, because there's nothing here. But then all of a sudden, as if out of nowhere, this wonderful church appears through the trees. And it's such an imposing church because it's so huge. It's like a miniature cathedral. And I realised my heart was pounding. I remember it now like it was yesterday. And I thought, wow, I love the look of this church. I'm going to go in. And it was just in time for the service. People were streaming into the church here. And the wonderful thing about here is you can park on the road, and you can park quite close to the church or all the way further down. And here it is, St. Mark's Church. And the building itself is impressive, but the church is God's people, and the people inside were even more impressive. They were so warm, so welcoming, and you instantly felt like, wow, I'm in the right place the moment I walked into this building. Yes. Let's see if we can go and have a quick look inside. Okay, so here we are, St. Mark's Church. Let's have a look around. On the day I got married here, there was big black clouds, thunder, and even lightning. And it was like, whoa, is this a sign from God that he's not happy about this marriage? But when we went in and went through the ceremony and the service and came back out here, it was bright sunshine. It was incredible. So it was through these doors that we went, but it looks like these doors might be closed. There might be a new entrance now, so let's see. Yeah, might be a different entrance. So let's have a wander around here. Hello. Is the church open at all to look inside?
Well, it's strange enough. The person who's supposed to be here this time of the week is not here.
Ah.
They can't be. They should be here shortly.
Okay.
But I know tomorrow it's open, definitely, on a Wednesday.
Yes.
I think they're going to reopen it again. I think it's from 11 to 1. I'm not sure it's from 11
Okay.
to 2.
Yes.
My wife, who's one of the sanitary, she'll be round in a moment. She's got a bit more idea. But I don't know where it is at the moment. So I just look after the garden and it's around.
Okay. Well, not to worry.
Are you somewhere local?
Yeah.
You look real professional.
Well, we're just doing some recording of. But I got married in this church 30 years ago. Yes, it was. Were you? Francis was the. Yes.
He's the one who asked me to do the garden.
Is he still here now?
No, he's retired down to the coast.
Right, right. And Linda was the.
Linda,
Curran or something like that.
Moved on, I think.
Yes, yes.
He's everybody.
Yes. Oh.
And your name is
Simon Teague.
Simon Teague.
If you see Francis, give him my regards.
I certainly will.
Yes.
No problem,
yes. Simon
and the camera there.
Yes.
Where is everybody? Because they're meant to be taking in some food.
Yes. I remember this is the hall where you have the teas and coffees after the service.
Right?
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Sunday school again now.
Yes.
And Christmas play.
Yes. And they had guitars and drums and all sorts. Does that still go on? Was it?
It's all changed.
Oh, has it?
They had a vicar a few years ago, he's left, and we've got another lady, a vicar.
Yes.
Actually, she might be able to help us.
Yes.
She might be able to help you both. She's extremely nice. Now that's church.
Hello, how are you? Yeah, we were just hoping to look in the church. I got married here 30 years ago. So, yeah, when Francis was our vicar and Linda also, the pair of them married us. And so it was just an opportunity. But if it's all closed, it's no problem.
I can open it. I've got the keys, but I don't know whether...
Virginia will be around in a minute.
Wow, that's great, isn't it? She's going to see if she can let us into the church, just to have a quick look and see if it's exactly as I remember it. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to experiencing that moment, you know, when I first walked in. And also, obviously, it has a unique, what's the word I'm trying to think of? I have a love for this church, you know, because getting married here and what have you, and I can remember that day like it was yesterday. So we'll see if we can get in.
Okay, Graham.
Thank you so much. Gosh, oh yes, I remember this. Yeah, it's like a, yeah, thank you. Yeah, brilliant. Oh wow. Oh, you can feel the Holy Spirit in this place. It's beautiful, absolutely beautiful. Well, it was 30 years ago that I walked down this aisle. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, really appreciate it. Yeah, it's a lovely, lovely church, isn't it? And God is glorified in this place. We were talking about stained glass windows, weren't we? Look at that, and the cross on the wall. And so, yeah, the service, my marriage service was recorded on video. So I know this church has not changed at all in the last 30 years, which is incredible. And you would, once you'd gone through the service, you would go up through a room there and sign, sign the documentation you need to sign. So yes, it was, glory to God. Here we are, is all the area where the drums and pianos and guitars. Look, there we are. We're saying this is what drew me to this place, that it felt so modern, yet it is such an old church building. You know, it has that perfect blend of still glorifying God in the people who originally built it in this way for a reason, because they wanted to glorify God. But we're still living in the modern age and celebrating God for the young people as well. It's really good. Yeah, wow. Amazing. So, from here, I was posted then to look after the village branches, and it involved a house move. So the bank bought our house in East Grinstead, and we then found a new house in Maidstone in Pennington Heath. And if we have time today, we'll pop there so you can see, because that was a very special house. This is where my children arrived, and both Lauren and Ellie, so it has very special memories in that respect. So on we go. We're now here at NatWest Barming branch. This was the first of my 6 little village branches around the Maidstone area. It's on the northwest side of Maidstone. It's now a vape shop, but the significance of this branch, it was where I experienced my first raid. So one morning I was with the staff at the branch. There was 3 ladies that worked here, and we were out the back discussing the day ahead. And all of a sudden, the door burst open, and all we could hear was the sound of shotguns going off. And actually what it was a gentleman who had a sledgehammer, and he was smashing the glass to try and get to the tills that were all set up and ready. And part of our raid drill procedure would be to drop to the floor and hide behind the counter so that he couldn't have any interaction with the staff, and the staff were safe. Obviously, that's not such good news if you're a customer in the banking hall, but on that day there was no one else in the banking hall, and after about 5 or 6 blows at this screen, and in realizing he couldn't break through, he ran off into the distance and was later caught actually by the police further down the road, trying to go into a Lloyd's bank, which was further down from here. So he was obviously a very desperate character. But we're going to go from here now to Marden, because that was my route: Barming, Marden, Staplehurst, Headcorn, Coxheath and Lenham. So here we go. This is NatWest Marden branch. It was no bigger than a living room. You couldn't fit any more than 2 customers in this little branch at a time. And doesn't it say a lot? This is the original door, and here we are, closed. It looks like it's just disused now. But in those days, when I was the assistant manager running this little branch, Nikki was the manager, and she had a lot of connections in the farming community. So they were mostly farming customers, and they were vociferous and insistent that we should install an ATM in this little branch so people could get cash. And I was battered for about 1.5 years by this community to try and get this ATM installed, but it never happened. And sadly, the branch is now closed. From here, we're going to move on to Staplehurst branch and see what that looks like. Thank you. God bless you. Thanks. Ah, it's a lovely, lovely town. When I left this little village, these village branches, all the ladies bought some little pictures for me, which I still have at home, of Staplehurst, Headcorn and Marden, and they're very precious to me, and they're on the wall in my little office. So yeah, I loved this job. This was a great job. We're now at NatWest Staplehurst branch, and this was the biggest branch of all my village branches, with about 4 staff here, and I had my own bank manager's office here with a big oak desk. And you can see, look, they've converted it now into a Subway, a Greggs and a Mercato Wines, and the only legacy that's left from NatWest is the ATM, which is in the corner here. And the story I have to tell about this branch is that I was the main key holder. So one night there was this huge storm and we were sleeping, and the phone started ringing at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I answered the phone and I kept hearing thunder, lightning. It was absolutely pouring with rain, and I answered the phone and it was NatWest head office. Are you the key holder to Staplehurst branch? Yes. All the alarms are going off, and in particular the intruder alert has been triggered. Can you please get down there? We've asked the police to meet you at the premises. 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm scrambling, putting all my clothes on. It is like buckets of water coming down. And as I came down this road here, it was all flooded. And my car was spraying up the water like this. It was pitch black. The lightning had caused an electrical cutout, so it was pitch black. All the lights were off, street lights. And as I got to the branch, I sat in my car. I've never been so scared in all my life, because no police, nothing, and it's pitch black. And I'm thinking, gosh, do I really have to go in to this branch? I had this huge mobile phone, like a big brick, and you pulled the aerial out like this, and I was trying to get through to the head office, but I couldn't get through at all. So I'm on my own, and with trepidation I think, well, I'm going to have to check this branch. So I put the key in the door, and I've got a torch with me, and I'm wandering around this NatWest Staplehurst branch thinking, I really hope there aren't any intruders in this branch. Please, please, Lord. And that's the time when I really believe God had surrounded me with angels, and was protecting me. And thankfully there were no intruders. It was probably the electrical storm that had triggered off the alarms. So, you know, a lovely little story and a memory to tell. And I got back home, crept into bed, listened to the thunder and the lightning and thought, oh, thank God I'm safe. And I loved working here. It was a great team of people. I had my own big office, and this was a very special branch for me. So from here, we're going to Headcorn, which is another interesting story. I have another interesting story to tell about Headcorn branch. Let's go. We are just coming into Headcorn, and on the right hand side here, we're about to pass the White Horse pub. Here it is, and you'll see that it has a car park just there. And that's significant because of the story I'm about to tell you when we get to the branch. This used to be NatWest Headcorn branch. It's now a family funeral service, which is quite apt actually, because the story about this branch is that it was Christmas time and the senior manager from NatWest Maidstone decided to join me in the banking hall area here to offer drinks to all the customers that were coming into the branch. We had 3 staff and we had quite a nice sized banking hall. So we laid out this table with all mince pies and mulled wine and everything, offering to the clients. And I showed you a pub on the way here, which is significant because whilst we were offering customers these drinks, all of a sudden all these police cars started going by, and all you could hear were the sounds of these sirens. Woo, 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 going by, police car after police car after police car, which in fairly sleepy agricultural Headcorn was very unusual. About half an hour later, these 3 police officers came into our branch and saw us, and we said, oh, hello officer, would you like a mulled wine, would you like a mince pie? And they said, no, but you might want to come out the back with us and have a seat while we explain to you what's going on. What they went on to explain to us was that they had been tracking 4 armed robbers who had already broken into NatWest in Red Hill and had fired off arms and taken a hostage in order to empty the bank of all its cash. And those same armed robbers drove down to Headcorn because their next target was our branch. But they decided before they went into the branch to stop at the pub that we saw and have a few drinks. And it was in that pub that they were boasting about what they'd just done in Red Hill. And the landlord phoned the police to say what he'd overheard. And the police were already tracking them and decided, we need to get them now. We can't allow them to make it down to Headcorn branch. So they literally raided the pub, got them all lying on the floor, hands behind their back. They went into the car park, they opened up the boot of their car to find all the cash that they'd taken from NatWest Red Hill and 4 sawn-off, fully loaded shotguns in the boot of the car. And we sat down thinking, I think the angels were looking after us that day, because had they not gone to that pub and boasted but come straight into the branch, we were in the banking hall with no protection and we would have been easy victims. So again, another lovely little branch that's no longer a NatWest branch, but despite that story, I had some wonderful memories working out here in the villages. So we're off now to our next venue. We're now on Gillingham High Street, and this was my first proper branch as a branch manager. And on my first day, I was walking along this high street and this gentleman in front of me collapsed, and he was having a heart attack or something similar, and he was a homeless guy, and I was the only one around. and he'd had a bottle of alcohol which he fell on and it smashed everywhere. So both him and I ended up smelling of alcohol on my first day. I also thought at some point I was going to have to give him mouth to mouth. Thankfully that didn't happen because another couple of bystanders ran up, they called an ambulance and it got here. But it made me slightly late for my first day as the bank manager for this branch. And in I stroll, smelling like I'd been down the pub. But it was a good start because what I found in this branch was the most friendliest bunch of people that I've ever worked with. And I have a bench in my garden, even now, that they bought me when I left this branch. And it's very nice to sit on this bench and remember Steve Blackburn and Paul Bettle and a number of others that used to work for me here. So I think we will just step in very quickly, but one of the things that we discovered in this branch was this old manual, which was nearly 100 years old. I think it was about 120 years old, which goes back to when the branch was first established. And this manual told the story of all the people who had opened an account for the first time. And it had this gentleman, whose name I can't quite recollect now, John somebody, who was the first person to open a bank account in Gillingham 120 years ago. And we managed to track down this gentleman who'd passed away, but we found his son and his grandson, and we invited them into the branch to show them this manual. And it made the local press, and we all dressed up in Dickensian outfits. So there's a photo somewhere in the press of me in this big top hat with Paul Bettle and Jane and a number of other members of staff and Steve Blackburn around with these old gentlemen celebrating the fact that their father and grandfather had opened an account here. But we had lots of fun. We had a couple of raids here. This is quite a challenging area. So there was a time when, you know, people tried to break into the bank and steal from the bank, but we recovered well from that, and that wasn't a problem. We were well trained in the art of dealing with raids, so we weren't worried about it. And I never worried. I used to lock this branch up when it was pitch black, walking down this high street back to my car, and I never worried. And I think, you know, I've always trusted that God has surrounded me with angels, and I really believe that he's done that all my life, and he certainly did that when I was working here. So I don't know what it looks like, but I think we should have a little peek inside. Yeah? Let's have a little look. Oh, wow. Yeah. It's totally different. I have no recollection of this, how they've changed this branch. It's completely different now. But anyway, it's interesting to see. So thanks for coming with me on this journey. We're going to go to Chatham branch now and see the next branch where I took half the team of these people with me, and I'll tell you a bit more about that when we get there. As we're heading to Chatham, there's a story that I've just remembered in respect of Gillingham branch. We had this lady come and visit us for training, branch training, and her name was Jane, and she was a really lovely lady, and we hit it off straight away. And she used to stay quite late, so I'd be locking up and almost ushering her out of the branch. Anyway, there was this one occasion when I said to her, "Come on, Jane, we have to go now. I'll give you a lift back to your car," because I didn't want her walking through Gillingham on her own anyway at that time of night, and it was winter, it was dark. In fact, it was definitely winter because as we left the branch, the heavens opened with this almighty hailstorm. And these hailstones were coming down like snow, but really quickly. And when we got to my car, we were literally running at full speed as fast as we could because it hurt the skin when these hailstones were hitting you. And as we got into my car, this lady, and she was immaculate. She had this lovely blonde, curly, thick hair. And when we got into the car, her hair was a block of ice. and literally this solid block of ice. So of course the windows are steaming up, I'm putting the heater on, and as I put the heater on, her ice hair starts to melt and she ends up with all her makeup down here, and it was just so funny. And we both thought it was so hilarious that we just couldn't stop laughing. It was so funny, and yeah, I wonder where she is now. But and another story, actually, whilst we're coming through Chatham, into Chatham, was I used to have management meetings at Chatham with my team. Sometimes those management meetings would go on past the time that we allocated. There was this one occasion when we finished around about 5:30, and I went back to my car with Bruce, who's a huge, tall, 6-foot guy, really nice guy, and I got this phone call. By the way, this was my first proper mobile phone. This was in the days when I had these early mobile phones, and all you could do was receive calls or phone out on them. Yes. So I received this call, and it was from my neighbour Tony, and he said, "Simon, I'm sorry to trouble you, but I've had a phone call from the nursery. Lauren's the last child left in the nursery. I can't get hold of Kath. They're very worried that you haven't been to pick up Lauren. So just to put your mind at rest, I've gone and picked her up for you." And I was supposed to pick her up at 4:30, and it was 5:30 when I picked up the message. So in a nutshell, I forgot my little Lauren. She was only 1 and she was at nursery, and I never lived it down after that, either from Kath or from Lauren. So the moral of the story is, when you've got kids, don't forget to pick them up when you're supposed to, because I got so embroiled in this meeting, I completely forgot all about it. Anyway, happy days. Here we are at NatWest Chatham branch, and my office was right up there in the top of the building, a room with a view. And it was from there that I really established my career in NatWest. Let's have a look at the branch a bit closer, because I have, again, really fond memories of this branch. The story behind working here is that I was the bank manager for Gillingham at the time, and I'd had a really successful year at Gillingham when they offered me a premium bank manager job, which meant looking after some of the bank's wealthiest customers. And I thought, well, that's quite a change in where I thought my career was going, but I'll say yes to it. So I did. But the very next day, someone phoned me up and said, "We don't want you to go there. We want you to take on being the senior branch manager for Chatham branch." And it was the second biggest branch in Kent, but it was one of the worst performing branches in the country when it came to mortgage sales and all the other criteria that they looked at. I said to them, "No, I'm not going to swap this really nice premium bank manager role for Chatham branch. However, if I could take my team with me from Gillingham, I might consider it." And after a few weeks of wrangling and upsetting a few area managers here and there, they came back to me and said, "Okay, yeah, fine, you can take your team." So I took the best of my staff from Gillingham and we came in here and we completely turned this branch on its head. It went from bottom in the country to top in the country within that year. And it gave us our first taste of what it was like to be rewarded and acknowledged as being top achievers in the bank, with a trip to Lisbon, which was amazing for the whole team. And from then on, I got this taste and this bug for always wanting to achieve. It really cemented my competitive nature and my desire to be a top achiever within the organisation. But the other thing about this branch is it was actually the last branch, unbeknown to me, that I would end up working at, because from then I was moved into the business side of banking, which is working with many different business teams, and moving into area manager, regional manager and senior manager roles, which involve lots of trips to head offices in London, Manchester and Edinburgh. So this was my last tangible branch, and I have a special memory for a lady called Elaine who worked here, who was blind, and she came every morning with her with her guide dog, Zeus. He was a wonderful dog, and she was from up north. So I always used to have this banter about, you know, people from the north and the south. And I'd arrive every morning and say, "Hey up, Chuck." And we would have this really lovely banter together. And sadly, she's passed on now, but you know, I have a special memory of her, so that's great. And the rest of the team as well. We did some great things. We had some great social events. We were doing a lot together as a team. At the same time, I'd had my daughter, Lauren, my first child. And so I have some special memories of having to race from the branch to pick her up from nursery and things like that, which was really lovely. And I still also believe that the Lord had his hand on my life at that point. There were times when I would seek solitude here, because I love being part of a team, but I also like the quiet time. And there's a beautiful cross on top of the hill up here that you can go to on a nice sunny day and just sit with peace and look over the whole of Chatham Dockyard. And that was something I used to like to do in the lunchtime. And I really felt that God was pulling on me at that point. And we decided to get Lauren christened. And because we were living in Maidstone and I was travelling up, we joined St Luke's Church in Maidstone with Reverend Eric Delve, and they really welcomed us in and we felt at home there. I remember us celebrating the millennium, the year 2000, New Year's Eve. We had a big party in St Luke's Church, and we took little Lauren along with us as well, and we had a really beautiful time. And that was very special because, again, the Lord was speaking to me and I wasn't listening. But he still stayed faithful to me, and my career from here, this was my launch pad into the senior management roles within the organisation. So I can't take you anywhere from here. I can't take you up to Manchester or Edinburgh or these huge head offices that I used to travel to and work in and out of. But I hope you've enjoyed the story that I've shared with you of the places that I've worked and the people that I've met. And I praise God and thank God for a blessed career and a blessed life that I've had working for this wonderful organisation, NatWest Bank. One of the biggest influences throughout my whole banking career was actually my dad. He was so proud every time I got a promotion or a move. He would run up and down the road in Knoll Place and knock on the neighbours and say, "You hear that? Simon's been promoted again." And I have a clip which I'll show you of a little newspaper article that my dad put into the newspaper to say, "Simon Teague, congratulations from T-boy to senior director, 25 years in NatWest." And those were 25 wonderful years. But the significance of this place is that I came here towards the end of my banking career. Things were not going well. That last year when Royal Bank of Scotland had taken over from NatWest, the whole culture of the organisation changed, and the leadership style and dynamic completely changed as well. One of inclusivity and empowerment into the top-down dictatorial leadership. And it was not a culture that I could thrive in any longer. In fact, it drove me to a point of a breakdown, and I needed to leave the organisation. So when the offer of redundancy came, I took it, and I took it not knowing what I was going to do, except that what I wanted to do was go into business on my own and create an opportunity for myself to build a leadership and management coaching and training business. But I was actually blind. I didn't know where I was headed or what was happening. And in this craziness of where my mind was, I started making decisions which were not the right decisions. They were my decisions and I take full responsibility for them. But they cost me my job, they cost me my marriage, they cost me my home, they cost me everything, to the point that I was sleeping, you know, in someone else's house, really, because I would have been homeless otherwise. And those decisions, whilst having cost me a lot, I look back on and realise that that was the lowest point in my life. Leaving NatWest was like a divorce in its own way. And at that lowest point, I became the prodigal son. I went off and I became 18 again and went out night clubbing and doing all the things that you shouldn't be doing when you're in your 40s, having a midlife crisis. And those years cost me, but at the same time, they've taught me much, because throughout that time, despite being in a low place, God was with me. God was watching, and God has forgiven me for the terrible decisions that I made. And sometimes that we all make these decisions, but God is a forgiving God, and He's been with me and forgiven me and brought me to this place. So at that time, it felt like one of the worst times in my life, but I look back and see that, again, I wouldn't be here, I wouldn't be who I am without those experiences that the Lord has brought me through. So praise be to God. I've really enjoyed today, yesterday and today. I've enjoyed this time. I want to thank King James for graciously coming with me on this journey and videoing this historic record. And I hope that you've enjoyed being on this journey with me and sharing these experiences with me. God bless you. Teaston, I think. Is it Teaston or Teston? Teaston. Teston's the posh way of saying it. Yes. Or Teaston. Which is a little park I used to come and have my lunch in. And this lovely place here was not here. So I had to make my own sandwiches in those days. Yeah. No luxuries like coffee, hot chocolate, nothing like that. God bless you. Thank you so much. Wow, that's great, isn't it? She's going to see if she can let us into the church. Just have a quick look and see if it's exactly as I remember.